be perfect. 300 guests, a ballroom overlooking Lake Norman, a bride in a dress flown in from Milan, and reserved in the second row, a single seat with a name card that read, Naomi Reyes. He wanted her there, not to celebrate, not to wish him well. He wanted her to sit in that seat in whatever she could afford to wear and watch him marry a woman he called an upgrade. That was his plan. But then a matte black Range Rover pulled up outside the ballroom doors, followed by a second SUV. And when the back door opened and a man stepped out, tall, unhurried, the kind of calm that only comes from never needing to prove anything, every phone in that lobby came out at once. Because the man reached back into the car, and the woman who took his hand and stepped out beside him was not the woman anyone in that room expected to see. Before I tell you what happened next, if you love stories where the quiet ones rise and the cruel ones fall, hit that subscribe button and turn on your notifications. Because what happens at the end of this one, it earns every second of your time. Now let me take you back to where this really started. The invitation came on a Thursday, cream cardstock, embossed lettering, the kind of paper that cost more per sheet than Naomi Reyes spent on groceries some weeks. She knew who it was from before she even opened it. She recognized the return address, recognized the particular shade of navy ink he always insisted on for anything official. She set it on the counter and looked at it for a long moment before she finally slid it open with a paring knife. Because in her house, even envelopes got handled with care. You are cordially invited to celebrate the marriage of Julian Voss and Brianna Kessler. Saturday, the 18th of October. The Ridgeline Ballroom, Lake Norman. And beneath the printed text, in his own handwriting, a single line. Saved you a seat up front, Naomi. Come see what a real partnership looks like. She read it twice. She didn't cry. She folded the card along its existing crease, set it on top of the refrigerator where her 8-year-old son, Malik, couldn't reach it, and went back to trimming stems at her kitchen table. Because the Ferris wedding order was due Friday and grief, she'd learned, was a luxury that didn't pay rent. Mom, what's that? Malik asked from the doorway, still in his pajamas. Nothing important, baby. Go brush your teeth. It wasn't nothing. It was Julian's last attempt to make her feel small one more time. He had no idea what he was about to set in motion. Naomi Reyes was 31 years old. She ran a floral design business out of the converted garage behind the small rental house she shared with Malik in Concord, just outside Charlotte, North Carolina. She had built the business from nothing over 4 years, one wedding bouquet and one grocery store flower bucket at a time. She woke at 5 most mornings to work the wholesale flower market before the good stock got picked over, then spent the rest of the day designing arrangements, driving deliveries in a Toyota Corolla with 200,000 miles on it, and picking Malik up from school by 3. She hadn't taken a real day off in over a year. To her neighbors, she was the quiet woman with the garage full of buckets and the sweet kid who waved at everyone. They knew she'd been married once, and that it hadn't ended well. They didn't know the rest because Naomi didn't talk about the rest. Not the marriage, not the divorce, not what 4 years with Julian Voss had actually cost her. She'd folded it up small and put it away, the same way she'd folded that invitation, and she focused on the one thing that still made sense to her, which was her son and the business she'd built out of nothing but dirt and stubbornness. To understand why that invitation landed the way it did, you have to understand what those 4 years took from her. Naomi grew up outside Savannah, the daughter of a nursery owner who taught her everything she knew about plants before she was old enough to drive. She moved to Charlotte at 22 for a job at an upscale floral boutique in the South Park neighborhood, the kind of place that did centerpieces for country club galas and understood the difference between garden roses and standard ones without being told. Julian Voss walked into that boutique one afternoon, needing an arrangement for a client dinner, wearing a suit that fit like it had been made for him, which it had, and a smile that made you forget whatever you'd been thinking about a second earlier. He came back 3 more times that week for arrangements he clearly didn't need. By the 5th visit, he had her number. By the 3rd date, she was hooked. By month 5, she believed every word out of his mouth, including the ones about the commercial real estate empire he was building one deal at a time. The truth, which she learned slowly and painfully over the years that followed, was that Julian Voss was a mortgage broker who talked like a developer and spent like one too, financed almost entirely by other people's money and his own considerable charm. They married after a year, A courthouse ceremony he promised would be followed by a real celebration once his next deal closed. The real celebration never came. What came instead was the actual Julian, revealed one small cut at a time. Comments about her cooking. Comments about how a woman married to him shouldn't still be showing up smelling like a flower shop at the end of the day. Comments about how her business was a nice little hobby, nothing that would ever need to be taken seriously. Small cuts, over and over, until by the time Malik was born, she barely recognized the woman looking back at her in the mirror. Julian was never home. He was closing deals, he said, building the empire, he said. What he was actually building, she discovered eventually, was a rotation. 3 different women across 2 years, funded by credit lines she didn't know existed, and secrets she found by accident on a laptop left open one night. When she confronted him, his answer was the one that stayed lodged in her chest longer than any of the affairs themselves. "And what exactly are you going to do about it?" he'd said, not even raising his voice. "Leave? With what money? You've got a garage full of flowers and a kid. You're nothing without me, Naomi. Nothing." He said it like he was reading a weather report, like it was simply a fact of the world, and for 2 more years, God help her, she believed him. She stayed 2 years past the point she should have left. Through the isolation, through the control over the finances, through the slow closing of every door that used to lead somewhere else, until the night he came home from a client dinner smelling like someone else's perfume and grabbed her wrist hard enough to bruise when she asked him about it. That was the night she left, with Malik in her arms and nothing but a diaper bag and the clothes she was wearing. She spent 4 nights on her sister's couch in Gastonia before she found the little rental house in Concord, and she rebuilt everything from there, 1 flower bucket, 1 Craigslist wholesale contact, 1 hard-won client at a time. The divorce had been its own kind of ugly. Julian's attorney painted her as unstable, unreliable, a woman who'd abandoned a stable marriage over nothing. He lost most of those arguments in court, but he'd hidden his money well enough that on paper he looked nearly broke, and the judge awarded her almost nothing beyond custody and $400 a month in support. "Enjoy the garage, Naomi," he'd said outside the courthouse, straightening his tie. "Enjoy your little flower buckets while I enjoy my life." That was 3 years ago. And now he was marrying someone younger, someone who fit the image he'd always wanted, and he needed Naomi to sit in the front row and watch. 4 days after the invitation arrived, something happened that felt, at the time, like nothing at all. Naomi was at Ferngrove Growers, a specialty nursery an hour outside the city that carried rare, imported blooms nobody else in the region stocked, hunting for a specific variety of dark burgundy dahlia. A client had fallen in love with online. She was on her knees in the back greenhouse, sorting through a delivery crate, when a voice above her said, "Excuse me, are you with the nursery?" She looked up. A man stood over her, tall, broad through the shoulders, dark hair going gray at the temples, wearing a faded flannel shirt and work boots that had clearly seen actual work. Nothing about him suggested money. Nothing about him suggested anything except a man who liked being outdoors. "No, I don't work here," Naomi said, standing and brushing dirt from her knees. "But I practically live here, so I might be able to help anyway." He smiled, and it was an easy, unhurried thing. "I'm looking for a particular rootstock for grafting," he said. "Something specific for an orchard project I'm working on." Naomi tilted her head. "What kind of project?" "Restoring an old family orchard," he said. "Heirloom apple varieties, mostly gone now. Trying to bring some of them back before the last of the original trees die out completely." Naomi's whole posture changed, the way it always did when someone spoke her language. "You want the propagation stock in the West greenhouse," she said. "Ask for Denny. He keeps the good scion wood behind the counter. Doesn't put it on the shelf unless you know to ask." The man studied her for a second. "How do you know all that?" "I grow things for a living," she said. "Plants make sense to me in a way people mostly don't." He laughed, a real laugh, low and warm. "I'm Eli," he said, holding out a hand streaked faintly with dirt. "Eli Bishop." "Naomi," she said. "Just Naomi." They walked to the West greenhouse together. She helped him track down Denny, helped him pick out 3 varieties of scion wood he hadn't known to ask for by name. And somewhere in the process, they ended up talking for 40 minutes about grafting techniques and soil pH. And, eventually, about nothing important at all, which was the best kind of conversation she'd had in longer than she wanted to admit. When they reached the register, he turned to her. "This is forward," he said. "But would you want to get coffee sometime? There's a roaster near where I live that does a pour-over that'll change your whole week." She hesitated. Every old instinct told her no. The last man who'd made her laugh like that had also nearly broken her. But there was something steady in the way he looked at her. Patient, undemanding, like a man with nowhere else he'd rather be. "Just coffee," she said carefully. "Just coffee," he agreed. It wasn't just coffee, not even close, though neither of them knew that yet. The coffee became a Saturday morning at the farmer's market. The farmer's market became dinner at a hole-in-the-wall barbecue place where the owner called him by name and asked about his mother. Every time they saw each other, Naomi learned a little more. Eli had grown up on that same family orchard 2 hours west of Charlotte, moved to the city for college, said he worked in agriculture, something to do with land and crops, vague enough that she never pushed for details, mostly because she wasn't looking for a man with money. She'd married one once, or the illusion of one, and it had very nearly finished her. What she noticed instead was how he listened. Really listened, not the half-listening Julian used to do with his phone lit up on the table between them. Eli put his phone face down and forgot about it entirely. He remembered that Malik was terrified of thunderstorms and obsessed with dinosaurs in equal measure. He remembered that Naomi's favorite color was the deep burgundy of a particular dahlia because it reminded her of her grandmother's garden gate. He remembered everything, and he never once made her feel like less than exactly who she was. Naomi believed Eli Bishop was a man who worked in agriculture in some modest, unglamorous way. She was wrong. Entirely wrong. Elias Bishop was the founder and chief executive of Bishop Agritech, a company that had spent a decade quietly building soil mapping and irrigation technology now used across 4 continents, valued by his last funding round at just over $2 billion. He held patents on drought-resistant crop systems being deployed by 3 different national governments. He sat on the board of a land conservation trust that had protected over 500,000 acres. His personal fortune sat somewhere north of $600 million, most of it still tied up in the company he refused to sell any real stake of. He owned the orchard land outright, along with 4 other working farms across 2 states, and he drove a 15-year-old pickup truck because, in his words, it still ran fine, and he saw no reason to change that. Eli had learned a hard lesson early about money and the people it attracts. His first marriage had taught him that. Renata had been beautiful, sharp, endlessly charming, right up until a rough funding year 3 years into the company's growth, when the money briefly tightened. She filed for divorce 4 months later and remarried a hedge fund manager within the year. She had never loved the orchard boy underneath the company. She'd loved the company. After that, Eli stopped talking about the business at all outside of boardrooms. He wore flannel instead of tailored suits, drove the truck instead of anything from his actual garage, and quietly waited for a woman who might want him instead of what he represented. Then he walked into a greenhouse looking for grafting stock and found a woman on her knees sorting dahlias who had no idea what he was worth and had helped him anyway, purely because she liked talking about plants. That was when Eli knew he'd found what he'd been looking for. He just wasn't ready to say so yet. Not until he was certain the truth wouldn't change anything between them. He was already certain about her. He needed time to be sure the reveal itself wouldn't spook something so new and so good. So he kept showing up in his flannel in his old truck, kept being exactly the man she'd met by the dahlias, and every week he fell a little further for her, not for her looks, though she was lovely, and not for her talent, though her arrangements were genuinely extraordinary, but for the sheer unbending will it took to keep waking up at 5 in the morning after everything life had thrown at her, and choose, every single day, to keep building something anyway. Naomi tried to throw the wedding invitation away twice. Both times she fished it back out of the recycling bin, not because she wanted to go, but because she was terrified of what it meant if she didn't. "He'll say I was too afraid to show my face," she told her best friend Denise over the phone one night. "He'll tell everyone I couldn't stand to watch him be happy." Denise made a noise of pure disgust. "Girl, forget Julian. That man is a walking red flag in a $500 tie." "I know," Naomi said, "but I think I need to close this chapter. Not for him, for me. I need to walk into that room and prove to myself that he doesn't get to live rent-free in my head anymore." "Then go," Denise said, "but go on your own terms, not his." That evening, Eli came over for dinner, as he did most Thursdays now, and spent an hour on the living room floor building a blanket fort with Malik that somehow required every couch cushion in the house. After Malik was asleep, Naomi showed him the invitation. Eli read it slowly, his jaw tightened at the handwritten line at the bottom. "Come, see what a real partnership looks like," he read aloud, his voice level but his eyes gone very still. "He's trying to hurt me one more time," Naomi said quietly. Eli set the card down carefully on the counter. "Do you want to go?" he asked. "I think I have to." He nodded slowly. "Then you're going," he said. "But not like this. Not alone." "What do you mean?" He looked at her the way he always did, like she was the only thing in the room worth paying attention to. "Naomi," he said, "there's something I should have told you a while ago." Her stomach dropped. Here it comes, she thought. Every fear she'd buried came rushing up at once. "He's married. He's leaving. He's not who he says he is." "What is it?" she asked carefully. Eli took a breath. "I'm not really in agriculture the way you think," he said. "I mean, I am, but not like that. I run a company, Bishop Agritech. We build irrigation and soil technology. He paused. "It's a fairly large company." Naomi blinked. "How large?" "Large enough that I have a security team I mostly ignore and a house I barely use," he said. "I'm worth a considerable amount of money, Naomi. More than I've ever wanted to lead with, because I needed to know you liked the man in the flannel shirt, not the number attached to him." Naomi stared at him. "The truck," she said slowly. "It's a good truck," he said. "You cooked me dinner on a camp stove that one time the power went out. It was excellent camp stove chicken," he said. "Eli," he reached across the counter and took both her hands. "Everything between us is real," he said. "Every coffee, every blanket fort, every Saturday at the market. I just left out a few bank accounts." Despite herself, Naomi laughed, a startled, unguarded sound that surprised her as much as it seemed to relieve him. "Why me?" she finally asked. "I've got a rental house and a Corolla held together with prayer and duct tape. Why would someone like you—" "Because you helped a stranger find grafting stock without knowing or caring who he was," Eli said. "Because you put your son before everything, including yourself, every single day. Because Julian Voss spent 4 years trying to convince you that you were nothing, and you're still here, still building, still showing up at 5 in the morning for flowers nobody else would bother sorting through." He wiped a tear from her cheek she hadn't noticed falling. "I've met plenty of women who wanted the company and the house, and the name, Naomi. You're the first one who ever wanted my Thursday nights. Do you understand how rare that actually is?" She couldn't find words for a moment. Then Eli's voice shifted, steadier, more focused. "About this wedding," he said, picking the invitation back up. "Your ex-husband wants you to walk in looking small, so he can feel enormous by comparison. That's the whole plan. Here's mine instead." And when he told her, it wasn't cruelty in his eyes. It was the calm, immovable certainty of a man who had negotiated with governments and never once lost his composure doing it. "Do you trust me?" he asked. Naomi looked into his eyes, steady, patient, entirely without agenda. "Yes," she said. "I trust you completely." "Then leave the rest to me," he said. The 18th of October arrived, and Julian Voss was, by every measure that mattered to him, having the best day of his life. The Ridgeline Ballroom sat on the edge of Lake Norman, all glass walls and imported stone, the kind of venue that photographed beautifully for the wedding blog he'd already hired someone to run. 300 guests filled the room. Business contacts, old fraternity friends, a small army of influencers he'd invited specifically to document the day for an audience much larger than the room itself. His bride, Brianna Kessler, was 25, a regional pageant winner turned brand ambassador, with a following just large enough to matter to him and small enough that she still needed someone to fund the lifestyle her page implied. Her dress had cost more than most people's cars. She knew exactly what she was marrying, and she was entirely fine with the arrangement because love, in her considered opinion, did not cover a Chanel handbag habit the way a man like Julian claimed he could. Julian stood at the front of the ballroom, scanning the crowd, looking for one particular face. He needed Naomi there. Needed her sitting in that second row in whatever she could scrape together to wear, watching him marry someone younger and shinier than she would ever manage to be again. He needed that moment the way other men needed air. The ceremony began. Brianna started down the aisle to scattered applause, but Julian's eyes kept drifting to the second row. Naomi's seat sat empty. His smile flickered. "She's not coming," his groomsman, Marcus, murmured from beside him. "She'll come," Julian muttered under his breath. "She has to." The officiant began the opening remarks. 5 minutes passed. 10. The seat stayed empty, and Julian's jaw tightened with every passing second, because this was not the plan. She was supposed to be sitting right there, watching, suffering quietly in last season's dress while he had everything she never would again. The vows began. "Do you, Julian Voss, take?" And then a low murmur rippled through the room, starting near the back doors and moving forward like a wave. Heads turned. Phones came up. Someone near the entrance whispered, "Oh my God, is that?" Through the glass wall behind the altar, Julian could see straight down the front drive. A matte black Range Rover had just rolled to a stop, followed by a second SUV close behind it. This was not a rental car. This was the kind of vehicle that arrived with its own gravity. The doors of the trailing SUV opened first, and two men in dark suits stepped out, scanning the entrance with the unhurried thoroughness of people who did this for a living. Then the rear door of the Range Rover opened, and a man stepped out, tall, broad-shouldered, dressed simply but impeccably. No tie, top button open, the kind of quiet confidence that didn't need volume to command a room. He walked around the front of the vehicle and opened the passenger door himself. And when she stepped out, she was not the Naomi anyone in that ballroom expected. Not a woman in last season's clothes. She wore a floor-length gown, the color of deep burgundy, a shade so exact and so specific that only Naomi herself could have chosen it, and the way it caught the afternoon light made her look less like a guest and more like the point of the entire day. Her hair was swept back, simple gold jewelry at her ears and throat, and she moved with the kind of stillness that comes from a woman who is, for the first time in a very long while, exactly where she means to be. She took Eli's offered hand, and together, flanked at a respectful distance by his security team, they walked toward the ballroom doors. Inside, 300 guests watched the whole thing unfold through the glass, and nobody in that room made a sound. Julian's expression cycled through disbelief, recognition, and something close to panic in the span of about 4 seconds, because he recognized the man beside his ex-wife. Anyone who followed agricultural technology or venture capital news even loosely knew that face. Elias Bishop wasn't just wealthy, he was the kind of wealthy that made Julian's carefully constructed empire look like a lemonade stand run by a teenager. Brianna leaned toward Julian at the altar. "Who is that?" she whispered, her eyes locked on Eli with an interest that had nothing to do with concern. Julian couldn't answer. His mouth had gone entirely dry. The doors opened, and Naomi walked in, and the room went completely silent around her. She had rehearsed 100 versions of this moment in her head over the past 2 weeks. What she would say, how she would hold her face, whether she would let herself smile. But standing in that doorway with 300 pairs of eyes on her, she found she didn't need a script after all. She just needed the truth. She walked down the side aisle at an unhurried pace, Eli beside her, his hand resting lightly at the small of her back, not possessive, simply present. His security stayed near the entrance. This wasn't their moment to be part of. She reached the second row, found her assigned seat, looked at it, and then looked at Julian. And she smiled. Not a bitter smile, not a performance of triumph, but something quieter and steadier than that, the smile of a woman who had walked through fire and come out the other side with nothing burned that actually mattered. "Hello, Julian," she said, her voice carrying easily in the silent room. "Thank you for the invitation." Julian opened his mouth. Nothing came out. Brianna was staring at Naomi's dress, her composure, her escort, and feeling for the first time in her adult life something close to inadequate. "Aren't you going to introduce me to your bride?" Naomi asked pleasantly. Julian managed. "Naomi, what? How are you here with?" Naomi tilted her head slightly. "You seem surprised," she said. "Wasn't that rather the point of the invitation? You wanted me here, so here I am." Eli extended a hand toward Julian. "Eli Bishop," he said easily. "You must be the groom. I've heard a fair amount about you." Julian shook his hand on pure reflex, his grip noticeably damp, his mind still racing to place the name and failing to land anywhere good. "Please," Naomi said. Don't let us interrupt. Do continue with your ceremony. She took her seat. Eli sat beside her, settling in with the unbothered ease of a man watching a show he already knew the ending to. The officiant cleared his throat and attempted to pick the thread back up. Where were we, do you, Julian? Take. Wait, Julian said, holding up a hand. He turned toward Naomi. Who is this man? He demanded, his voice pitched too loud, too desperate. Where did you even meet him? Is this some kind of setup? The crowd shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Naomi crossed her ankles calmly. Julian, she said, you're in the middle of your own wedding. Your bride is standing 3 feet away from you. You might want to focus there. Don't tell me where to focus, he snapped. You show up here with security and a car worth more than my house? You, the woman who couldn't afford to fix her air conditioner 3 years ago. Where exactly did you? I got nothing from anyone, Naomi said firmly, her voice quiet but somehow carrying to every corner of the room. This dress, she said, was designed by a friend of mine, and every flower on this property this morning came out of my own greenhouse. I built the thing you're staring at with my own 2 hands, the same hands you told me were only good for arranging someone else's flowers. The room had gone completely still. This man beside me, Naomi continued, found me. Not because I had money or status or the right last name, because I was honest with him. Because I show up at 5 in the morning for work nobody else wants to do. And he saw the value in that when you never once bothered to look. Julian's face had gone a deep, furious red. And this invitation, Naomi said, drawing it from her clutch and holding it up so the nearest guest could see the handwriting clearly. You wrote, come see what a real partnership looks like. So I came. And now everyone in this room can see exactly what one looks like. She set the card down gently on the empty chair beside her. The question, Julian, is whether you can say the same. She glanced at Eli. He said nothing at all. He didn't need to. 300 guests stared at Julian Voss, and for possibly the first time in his adult life, he had absolutely nothing to say. Brianna, however, had plenty to say, because she'd been doing quiet math since the moment that Range Rover pulled up. Bishop Agritech, $2 billion in valuation, give or take. She looked at Julian, looked at Eli, looked back at Julian one more time, and the math simply wasn't difficult. Julian, she said slowly, did you divorce this woman? Brianna, not right now. You divorced a woman who is currently standing here with Elias Bishop. The Elias Bishop. Brianna, are you serious right now? Brianna took a full step back from the altar. I'm not marrying a man who can't tell the difference between an asset and a liability, she said flatly. If you were foolish enough to let that walk away, what exactly are you planning to do to me in 3 years? Brianna, stop this right now. I think I'm done stopping anything, she said, and pulled the ring from her finger. This wedding is over. She set it down on the altar rail, and it rolled once before it settled, the small sound somehow deafening in the silence of the room. She turned and walked back up the aisle. Passing Eli, she slowed just slightly. Do you happen to have a card? She asked under her breath. For future reference. I'm taken, Eli said without missing a beat. Brianna kept walking. The ballroom doors closed behind her, and Julian Voss stood alone at the altar in front of 300 guests, in front of phones that were all still recording, in front of the one woman he had spent years convincing himself was nothing. His knees actually seemed to buckle slightly, and he caught himself against the altar rail. Naomi, he said, his voice cracking. Please, I made a mistake. Naomi rose slowly to her feet. You didn't make a mistake, Julian, she said. You made choices. Every lie was a choice. Every time you told me I was worthless, that was a choice too. She picked up her clutch. And now I'm making mine. She took Eli's arm. I choose to walk away, she said. Not because I'm angry, though I certainly was for a long time, but because I finally know exactly what I'm worth, and it was never something you had the ability to determine. They walked back up the aisle together, and 300 guests watched in absolute silence. At the doors, Naomi paused and turned back one final time. Oh, and Julian, she said, my air conditioner works fine these days. She smiled once more and walked out into the afternoon sun. The video was online before Naomi even made it back to Concord. It spread everywhere within days. Every local news outlet, every wedding forum, every corner of social media that thrived on exactly this kind of moment. Florist crashes ex-husband's wedding with a literal billionaire. Groom left standing alone after bride and ex-wife both walk out. The headlines multiplied by the hour, but Naomi didn't spend much time reading any of them because she was too busy actually living her life for the first time in years. Eli introduced her to his world slowly. He said, "My what? Reyes Botanical Design," he said. "Your real flagship. I had the lease signed last week. The build-out is yours to design however you want it." "You did all this," she said. "For me? No," he said. "I did this for the woman who was sorting dahlias by hand in a rented garage at 11 at night. You earned this space a long time ago. I just opened the door. You're the one who has to walk through it." Naomi wandered the empty warehouse slowly, running her fingers along the exposed brick, the raw concrete floor, imagining exactly where the walk-in coolers and the design tables would go. In the far corner, a small framed shadow box already hung on the wall, and inside it sat a single dried burgundy dahlia, the same variety she'd been sorting through the day they met. That was when Naomi finally broke down completely, crying into Eli's shoulder for a long while, and for the first time in longer than she could remember, the tears were the good kind. Reyes Botanical Design reopened in its new home 6 months later, and within its first year became the most requested floral studio in the Charlotte region, eventually landing features in 2 national design magazines and a standing contract with one of the largest event venues in the state. But the moment that mattered most to Naomi wasn't any of the press coverage. It was the evening Malik came to see the finished studio for the first time, running through the space, touching every bucket and every work table with wide eyes. "Mom," he said, tugging her sleeve, "did you build all of this?" Naomi knelt down to his level. "Every last bit of it, baby," she said. "Are we rich now?" he asked with the blunt honesty only an 8-year-old can manage. Naomi smiled and pulled him close. "We were always rich," she said. "We just didn't know where to look yet." As for Julian, the video made him famous for exactly the wrong reasons. His mortgage clients quietly disappeared over the following months. Old friends stopped returning his calls. His social media accounts became a graveyard of comments he eventually had to disable entirely. He tried reaching out to Naomi 4 separate times. She never once responded. He tried reaching Eli's office exactly once and received a single line back from an assistant. "Mr. Bishop does not conduct business with individuals outside his professional network." Within a year, the loans that had financed his entire lifestyle came due all at once, and without new clients to keep the illusion afloat, the whole structure collapsed. He lost the house in Ballantyne, lost the car, lost the image he'd spent a decade constructing. Last anyone in Charlotte heard, he was working under someone else's name at a smaller brokerage 2 counties over, renting a 1-bedroom apartment and telling anyone who'd listen that things were about to turn around any day now. Brianna, for her part, married a cardiologist in Wilmington less than a year later and posted about the whole thing extensively online. The comment sections under those posts tended to include at least one person asking whether she was the same woman who'd walked out of that infamous wedding, until she eventually turned the comments off entirely and stopped posting altogether. Eli proposed to Naomi on a quiet Sunday morning in the new studio, surrounded by fresh stock for the week's orders, and the ring itself was custom designed. A simple woven gold band set with a single stone, engraved along the inside with 2 words, Ferngrove Greenhouse. Naomi said yes before he even finished asking the actual question. They married the following spring in a small ceremony behind the Orchard House, 2 hours west of the city, 60 guests, string lights strung through the old apple trees. His family had spent 3 generations preserving. Naomi designed every arrangement herself, deep burgundy dahlias woven through with sprigs from the very orchard where his family's story had begun, and it remains, by every account from everyone who attended, the single most beautiful thing anyone in that town had ever seen, not because of the flowers themselves, but because of the woman who arranged them and everything she'd walked through to get there. Julian Voss sent that invitation to break Naomi Reyes. He wanted her sitting in a folding chair feeling small while he stood at the front feeling enormous by comparison. Instead, she walked in wearing something she'd built with her own hands, on the arm of a man who had never once needed to raise his voice to prove what he was worth, and she dismantled everything Julian had spent years constructing without ever once losing her composure. She didn't need revenge. She never even raised her voice. She only needed the truth, and the truth was simply this. The woman he called worthless had been priceless the entire time. The hands he mocked had gone on to build an actual empire out of dirt and stubbornness and 5 o'clock mornings. And the life he swore she'd never find without him was waiting for her the whole time, in a greenhouse, on her knees, sorting dahlias for a stranger who turned out to be exactly the right one. And that's the lesson worth carrying out of this story. Your worth was never up for someone else's vote. The people who work hardest to make you feel small are, almost without exception, the ones who never built anything real themselves. And sometimes the sweetest kind of justice isn't loud at all. It's simply becoming everything they swore you never could and letting them watch it happen in real time. If this story moves something in you, subscribe and turn on that notification bell, because every story deserves its ending, and this channel never runs out of them.